There are events going on in the world today that you're not being told about. The mainstream media has pretty much dominated all of your headlines with only a few different things. In this video, I'm going to reveal those things that you haven't been shown and haven't been told. And in the process, I'm going to continue to illustrate the contrast between what you believe to be good, right, and true, and what you're being told is good, right, and true. A lot of people think I spend too much time talking to my naysayers and talking to the people that disagree with me. I think it's the only way to go about it, to be very truthful. I am not a preach to the choir kind of guy. Those that see themselves as my enemy, a lot of them I believe to be good, decent people that are just misinformed. And I have some more information, without any further delay, that I would like to share with you regarding this. It's the contrast between South America and Africa. Africa, these countries on this continent, have very little government involvement in the free market. Whatever goes, just goes. This is the root of the Nigerian prince scam that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. But there are also different things, different mechanisms that go on inside Africa that not a lot of North Americans know about. But in South America, in Venezuela, how the bloom has fallen off the rose. Now, this is, of course, random guy named Juan, and he is hopping a fence, trying to get out of town, being the huckster that he is, being the snake oil salesman that he was. Oh, a year ago he was ever so popular, and the media wanted you to believe there were these huge throngs of people that had turned out to support him, when it was shown that very clearly they were using camera techniques and manipulating the digital images, when it was really maybe a few hundred people at most. And then the rallies to support the actual real government of Venezuela. You couldn't hide those. The tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people that came out to support social democracy that says the resources of their nation constitutionally belong to the people. Now, in this article real quick, and I will of course link it for you, in a chaotic and confusing session Sunday, a portion of Venezuela's National Assembly announced that Luis Parra was the new head of Congress, denying random guy named Juan, the man that Washington and more than 50, almost 25%, other nations consider the country's legitimate president. His re-election. The announcement came after Guaido and many of his allies were barred from the legislature, and while most of the independent media had been kept outside, some lawmakers said there had been no quorum and no real vote during the session, calling the move a congressional coup. He's done. He's toast. See, nobody wants to answer the question. If Maduro really is a dictator, why, a year on now, is this man still walking around free? Why was he allowed to be a member of this National Assembly that has really no power anymore? They were made defunct by the Constitution of Venezuela. They have built into their Constitution this partitioned hard drive, so to speak, that when their Congress gets so infiltrated with corrupt interests, they can then call what we would basically call it a constitutional convention. They call it a National Constituent Assembly. And they can redo the government from the ground up, which is what they did. Now, for those of you that supported the guy and are feeling kind of queasy and dirty and slimy inside, Amazon offers Y8. It is a real product, and I'll go ahead and link that, and you can get yourself some. And it'll help loosen up all of that slime and mucus inside you, and you can hack it up and get it out of your system. Now, some of you are wondering, well, wait, what does this have to do? You were talking about Africa. A long time ago, there was a series called MASH. And in that series, there was an episode where the leader of the unit, Colonel Potter, was not himself for a while, and everyone around him wondered what was going on. At the end of the episode, he reveals that he was the last survivor of this thing called a tontine. A tontine is a pledge where a group of people who trust each other to some degree get together and say, okay, we're going to put everything in this kitty, or a certain thing in this kitty, and the last survivor of us gets the thing. Now, in this case, it was a bottle of old French brandy that the last group, he was the last surviving member of this group of 4 that he had served with in World War I. Now, in this aspect, a tontine is a, harmless thing. And that's defined here. An annuity shared by subscribers to a loan or common fund, the shares increasing as subscribers die until the last survivor enjoys the whole income. Now, what does this have to do with Africa? This is one of the most common forms of retirement investment in Africa. The tontine. Yep, that's right. A whole bunch of people pay a whole bunch of money into a fund, and last man standing gets it all. What could possibly go wrong? I'm sure that my audience is smart enough to have already thought this through and go, golly, yeah, there wouldn't be any effort to try to off other members so that you're the winner. Imagine being the administrator, though, the person that's supposedly the independent party that has no skin in that game, how that could be abused. Because the only person that could ever make a claim will be the one left person. There could be no class action lawsuit, because if 2 people are still alive, or 3 people are still alive, the tontine is still in effect and nobody collects it. Now, what if you put one together where nobody knew the other members or knew their names, which you would kind of have to do to prevent this? You would have to keep everybody, investing in this somewhat anonymous so that it didn't get, abused. Well, it does. People get shot, killed over this stuff all the time. And it was made popular, at least in the modern era, by this episode of The Simpsons. But they ripped this off from MASH back in the 70s. And this is not a joke. This goes on every day in Africa. Now, if you think that you are immune to that kind of thinking here, that free market thinking here, who remembers the last 10 to 15 years on the internet? We have always seen those little advertisements that say, cheap life insurance now, little blurb over in the corner, for only blah, 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 no medical exam, and super inexpensive. You see, there has been this type of attitude going on with these life insurance policies for the baby boomers. You see, they're starting to die now, and they're dying in large numbers. And when these life insurance companies now have to start paying out policy after policy after policy after policy, where do you think the money's going to come from to maintain their status quo? See, there's not as many people coming into the workforce able to pay for life insurance as are leaving. This is why the housing market here, especially here in Florida, the next 5 to 10 years is going to collapse, and you're going to be able to get beautiful, brand new houses with, all sorts of amenities, super, super cheap. And that's why you should see what's going on now in places in central and just northeast Florida. The huge amounts of houses that were only built maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15. And they've got Roman jacuzzi tubs, covered pools, vaulted ceilings, all stainless steel appliances, tile floors, brand new. And the old people lived there for maybe 15 years and died. And they're sitting there on the market empty. literally almost as new as the day they were built. You see, this is what's coming. They have got to find a way to get that money coming in to pay those life insurance policies. And you mark my words, this Tontine crap they're gonna figure out a way to do it. Sorry, I just trying to find who's responsible here, and I always have these extra pictures and I can't ever figure out, gosh darn it, I'm so sorry. Sorry about that, guys. I just sometimes don't always pay attention to everything, and it's real. This is what goes on in Africa. Now, those of you thinking that, there we go, Venezuela is so bad, they don't have to worry about stuff like this. Because I'm still speaking to those who think I'm some kind of crazy, terrible socialist. You see, here in America, North America, all those programs like food stamps, subsidies for farmers, tax breaks for corporations, all that money comes from the taxpayer. When you go and you walk around the grocery store and you see the prices, instead of the government saying, okay, we're going to have a government grocery store, they just do it a different way. They implement the socialism a different way. They hand you a card that takes, that's $200 worth of free groceries, called EBT. Or the farmer who wants to charge XYZ price in order to meet his need, to meet his demand, doesn't have to. He charges less. Why? Because the government steps in with a subsidy and says, here's a check, now artificially make your products cheaper. That happens every day in North America. The subsidies, the food stamps, everything, the big government socialism. Where does that money come from? In North America, it comes from taxes. Now, here's the part that's going to make you angry. Insanely angry. Do you know where it comes from in Venezuela? They don't get that money from taxing the people. You know what they do? They pump oil out of the ground. The government does. And they sell it on the open market. And then that money coming into the government finances all of that stuff. You're probably asking, wait a minute, we have a ton of oil. Why don't we do that here? Yeah, big oil corporations that are buying all sorts of marketing firms to make you believe the free market is your savior, that the rising tide lifts all boats, and all this other bullshit. This is what they want you to believe. Imagine if we took the oil that we have here and say, okay, you know what? It belongs to these 380 million Americans. And we are going to sell it on the open market. And then the profits from that are going to finance the government. And in turn, we're going to get rid of all of these taxes. In fact, if you don't make $250,000 a year, you don't have to pay taxes. That's impossible. Baloney. Look at how much U.S. oil companies are making. Look at their profit. Look at their bottom lines. It could easily finance our country. This is what they don't want you to know. If you want to see what the natural end of a free market, laissez-faire, neoliberal attitude is, very simply, go live in Nigeria for a while. Some people have told me, why don't you go live in Venezuela? I'll tell you what, before DC and Saudi Arabia attacked, it was a beautiful place to live. Things were free or cheap. They talk about this great fall that Venezuela had. Venezuela's always been socialist. There's never been a time, even before Chavez, they weren't socialist. How could they have ever gotten so wealthy? Did you ever ask yourself that question? Those who are, naysayers and contradicting me? How did Venezuela ever get so wealthy that they had that far to fall? They were never capitalist. They were never neoliberal. They were never like that. In fact, the height of their wealth was under Chavez. When we were near collapse in 2008, they were doing great. They barely saw a hiccup. One of the few nations around the world that did. Absolutely ride through that with almost no problem. This idea of a tontine, last man standing, as an investment device, is highly illegal in the United States. For a good reason. Because it's a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme of sorts. And that's what's going to be happening with our life insurance and our housing market very shortly. And I guess I will just leave that there. God bless, like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.